Welcome, dear listener. Settle yourself now as the day fades, as the glow of evening softens the sky, and as the fire beside you burns low. You are safe here, you are warm here, and together we will wander once more into the world of the past. Tonight, our steps will carry us along the roads of medieval Europe, where travel was slow, where paths were narrow, and where every journey was measured not in miles, but in footsteps, sir, in hoofbeats, in the long turning of the seasons. In this episode, we will walk the roads and tracks of the Middle Ages. We will step out from the cottage door and follow the lane that winds between hedgerows and meadows. We will walk with peasants carrying baskets and bundles upon their backs, and with merchants leading donkeys heavy with goods. We will ride alongside pilgrims with staffs in hand and sit upon the creaking boards of carts drawn by patient oxen. We will stop at inns and taverns where food is plain but welcome, where firelight glows and voices mingle. We will cross rivers by ferries and bridges, and sometimes wade through fords with water swirling around our legs. We will pass through forests, deep and shadowed, where branches whisper above and where the road seems to vanish into green silence. We will join pilgrims upon their holy journeys, steady in step and certain in purpose. We will enter towns alive with market days, where stalls are bright with goods, and where the voices of strangers carry stories from far away. And in the end, as always, we will find our way to rest, whether at home, at a shrine, or simply in the comfort of a rival. The medieval road itself was seldom grand. It was a path of soil and dust, of mud and rut, of puddle and stone. In dry summers, the earth grew hard, cracked beneath the sun, dust rising with every step to coat hair and skin. In winter rains, the road turned to mire, sucking at boots and hooves, slowing carts until they creaked and groaned. In spring, fresh grass grew along the verges, wildflowers brightened the edges, while in autumn the road lay scattered with fallen leaves, damp and fragrant beneath travelers' feet. Yet whatever the season, people traveled, for need, for duty, for trade, for devotion, for the simple call of necessity. Imagine yourself now standing at the edge of a medieval village. Behind you, the cluster of cottages huddles close, smoke curling from chimneys, hens clucking in the yard, children calling in play. The church spire rises modest and grey, a bell tolling faintly in the distance. Before you stretches a narrow lane, worn by countless feet, lined with hedges thick with bird song. It bends and twists between fields, vanishing into distance. This is the road ahead, plain, uncertain, yet full of promise. So, the road is alive with sound. Boots crunch on gravel, hooves thud softly upon earth. Wooden wheels groan in their grooves. A farmer drives his oxen, their breath steaming in the cool air, their hooves slow and heavy. A tinker passes, pots and pans clattering upon his pack, his song rising to keep his steps in rhythm. A pilgrim moves quietly, staff tapping, lips murmuring prayers. Children run barefoot past, their laughter bright, carrying baskets of herbs or bundles of sticks. Each traveler moves at their own pace, yet all share the same narrow path. The smells too tell of the road: dust, damp earth, dung dropped by animals. the faint sweetness of hawthorn blossoms in spring, the sharpness of crushed nettles underfoot. When carts pass, scents travel with them, the salt tongue of fish, the earthy smell of onions, the sweetness of hay, the sour note of fermenting ale. The road is not only walked, but tasted, smelled, heard, and felt, every step a meeting of senses. For the sound of postere, the rhythm of travel is slow. Distances that we might measure today in brief minutes once took long hours. Even whole days. To walk 10 miles meant a dawn departure and an evening arrival. To journey to a town beyond the hills might take 2 days, with a night spent sleeping beneath a hedge, or in the loft of a barn, or in the shared straw of an inn. Travel was patient, deliberate, demanding both strength and endurance, and yet the road was more than a strip of earth. It was a thread that bound together village and town, field and market, cottage and castle, shrine and city. Along these paths moved not only goods, wool, grain, timber, wine, but also stories, songs, rumors, and prayers. A man might leave home with a bundle of cloth and return with tales of a distant town. A woman might walk to market with a basket of eggs and return with news of births, betrothals, and deaths. The road carried voices as much as it carried feet. Seasons colored the road in their own way. In winter, travelers wrapped themselves in cloaks, their breath rising white in the air. Snow muffled the sound of hooves. The world hushed. Progress slowed. Fires at inns burned more brightly. The taste of hot broth was a treasure. In spring, rains turned the road to mire, puddles deep, wheels stuck, boots sodden. Yet blossoms shone white and pink upon hedges, lambs bleated in meadows, and the hope of warmth quickened every step. In summer, the road baked dry, dust rising to sting eyes and throat. Fields rippled gold with grain, the air buzzing with insects, the horizon shivering with heat. In autumn, the air smelled of apples and smoke, of cut hay and damp leaves. Carts creaked under the weight of harvest, children rode upon sacks of grain, and every step seemed softened by the glow of plenty. Travelers met one another on these roads, and each meeting was a moment of connection. A shepherd driving sheep to market might pause to a merchant's pause to let a merchant's horse pass. A pilgrim might share a crust of bread with a stranger at a crossroads. A child might wave at a passing cart and be tossed an apple by the driver. Stories were exchanged as easily as greetings, news carried from one village to another. By the simplest of encounters, the road was not lonely, though it could be long. It was a place of mingling, of passing lives, brushing briefly together before parting again. Sometimes the road held danger too. Thieves lurked in forests, storms flooded rivers, wolves prowled at night. But more often the road held endurance. The steady trudge of feet, the creak of carts, the patience of travelers moving slowly toward their destination. And so, as we set out together on this journey of imagination, let us begin gently. The fire is low, the night is deep, and before us stretches the road ahead. We need not hurry. Each step will bring us further into the world of medieval travel. Each pause will reveal new sights, new scents, new sounds. The path is long, but we walk it in peace, in calm, in quiet wonder. Step by step, scene by scene, we will follow it. Tonight, the road is not only a path through medieval Europe, but also a path into rest. Walk softly now, breathe deeply, and let the journey begin. Imagine the morning sun rising over a medieval village. The cottages glow with a soft gold, their thatched roofs still damp with dew. Smoke curls thinly from chimneys as fires are stoked anew. The cockerel crows, hens scatter, and the steady lowing of cattle fills the still air. Wow. This is the hour when travelers begin their way, and the first step of any journey is to pass along the village path. In spring, the village path is lively with growth. Nettles rise in clumps, daisies scatter across the verges, and hedges are frothy with blossom. The air is damp, carrying the smell of turned soil from nearby fields where plows cut furrows. Frogs croak in the ditches, and the path is slick with mud from frequent rains. Travelers pick their way carefully, boots heavy, carts splashing through puddles. At times, the rain falls so suddenly that strangers huddle beneath trees together, sharing bread or stories while the storm passes. Children splash happily in puddles, their mothers calling them back, laughter mingling with the patter of drops. In summer, the path grows dusty. Grass withers at its edges, and clouds of midges hover in the warm air. Children run barefoot, their feet brown with dust, their hair shining in the sun. Carts creak by, loaded with hay or vegetables, oxen swaying in the heat. The smell of honeysuckle drifts from hedges, mingling with the sharpness of dung left by passing animals. At midday, travelers rest beneath trees, sharing bread and cheese, sipping ale from leather flasks, their voices low in the heavy stillness. Sometimes a peddler passes, bells on his pack jingling faintly, drawing children close to glimpse his wares, bright ribbons, needles, tiny mirrors that sparkle in the sun. In autumn, the path is scattered with leaves, brown, gold, and russet, crisp beneath boots. The air smells of apples, of smoke from burning stubble, of damp earth. Carts are piled high with sacks of grain, barrels of cider, baskets of nuts. Villagers greet each other as they pass, exchanging thanks for the harvest, speaking of what has been gathered and what must yet be stored. The path is busy, alive with the hum of preparation, every step taken with both relief and urgency. Children ride upon the tops of hay carts, waving at those who walk beside. Neighbors pause to compare harvests, their words measured, their smiles weary but content. In winter, the path lies bare and cold. Frost sharpens the edges of hedges, breath rises in white plumes, and boots crunch upon the frozen ground. Snow muffles sound, turning the world hushed and still. Few travel far in this season, but even so, the path does not rest. A farmer carries firewood on his back, his cloak wrapped tight. A woman hurries to the next hamlet, a basket of wool in her arms. Children throw snowballs, their laughter bright against the stillness. Sometimes footsteps are the only sound, lonely and slow, the road stretching long between patches of warmth and shelter. And yet, when the snow glitters in moonlight, the path seems to glow, a silver ribbon leading ever onward. Along the village path, strangers sometimes meet. A pilgrim pauses at the well, his staff resting, his eyes lifted to the church tower. A merchant asks the way to the nearest town, his donkey laden with cloth and salt. A shepherd greets a neighbor with a nod, his sheep bunching nervously at the edge of the lane. A child, shy but curious, offers a passerby a handful of berries gathered from the hedge. Each meeting is brief, yet each reminds the traveler that no road is truly empty. Lives brush against one another. News spreads. Kindness is offered. Sometimes a crust of bread. Sometimes only a word of blessing. The path holds memories too. A child remembers chasing a hoop down its length, tripping and rising with skinned knees. A bride remembers walking it to the church on her wedding day, her heart racing, her friends laughing at her side. An old man remembers leading his oxen for the last time, pausing to rest his aching back and watching the sun sink beyond the hedges. To walk the village path is to walk among echoes, each step layered upon those who came before. Echo. And when evening falls, the path changes once more. The air cools, shadows lengthen, the sky glows with sunset. Travelers quicken their steps, eager for the warmth of hearth and fire. Smoke rises from chimneys, lamps glow in cottage windows. The smell of pottage drifts into the lane. The path narrows again, drawing the wanderer homeward. For every journey outward there is a return, and the village path is both departure and arrival. It is a threshold, the edge between what is familiar and what is unknown. To step onto it is to leave behind comfort, yet also to embrace possibility. The path is ordinary, walked each day, and yet it is also sacred, for it is the first step in every journey, the ribbon of earth that binds the village to the wider world. So pause here and listen to its sounds, the rustle of hedges, the creak of wheels, the voices of neighbors greeting each other in passing. Smell the dust, the blossoms, the smoke. Feel the earth beneath your feet, firm and familiar. This is the village path, the first road, the first step, humble and ordinary, yet filled with life, memory, and meaning. Not all who traveled in medieval Europe walked. Some rode, and some were carried slowly upon carts. To travel by horse or by cart was not common for the poor, but for those who could afford it, or those whose journeys demanded it. It changed the rhythm of the road, where the walker felt every stone beneath his boots. The rider rose above, carried upon the strong back of an animal, where the walker measured distance in weary miles. The cart rolled steadily onward, burdened but enduring. Horses, mules, donkeys, oxen, all played their part in turning road into journey. The horse was the most prized companion upon the road. To sit upon its back was to feel the world pass differently. The body rose and fell with the rhythm of hooves. The leather of the saddle creaked. The reins pulled gently in the hand. A well-kept horse carried its rider swiftly, its mane lifting in the wind, its breath warm, its ears flicking at every sound. Nobles traveled on horseback, their cloaks flowing, their harness shining with buckles of bronze or silver. Messengers rode swiftly, their satchels strapped tight, their eyes fixed on the road ahead. Even peasants might ride a small pony when burdened with goods too heavy to carry on foot. To ride was to know partnership. The horse was no mere tool, but a creature with will and temper. It snorted when impatient, stamped when restless, slowed when tired. The rider learned to read the toss of its head, the twitch of its ears, the shift of its stride. The bond between man and horse was forged mile by mile, trust growing with every shared journey. The sound of riding was the steady drum of hooves upon soil, the jingle of harness, the creak of saddle leather. The smell was of horseflesh warm in the sun, of sweat beneath the mane, of leather oiled and cared for. The sight was of ears pricked forward, eyes alert, nostrils flaring as the road stretched on. To ride was to see the road from higher up, to pass walkers with a nod, to feel the air move more swiftly across the face. Not all journeys were swift or noble. Donkeys and mules bore burdens humbler, but no less important. Their backs were laden with sacks of grain, baskets of vegetables, bundles of wool. They stepped patiently, ears twitching, eyes steady, moving at a pace slower than the horse, but more enduring. A donkey might bray stubbornly, refusing to move until coaxed or tugged. Yet once set upon its way, it carried its load faithfully. Mules bred of horse and donkey were prized for their strength, their patience, their sure-footedness. They walked mountain paths, forded rivers, carried loads across distances too great for man alone. Merchants trusted them with goods, pilgrims leaned upon their steady gait, farmers loaded them with produce for market. Their hooves struck the ground with quiet confidence, their steady breath a comfort upon the long road. For heavier burdens, the cart was needed. Drawn by oxen slow and steady, it carried more than any man or mule could bear. Its wheels creaked, its axles groaned, its boards rattled with every stone. To sit upon a cart was to feel the sway of its movement, the lurch as it struck a rut, the slow climb of hills, the careful descent into valleys. Oxen moved with patience, their shoulders straining against the yoke, their breath rising in clouds. They were not swift, but they were enduring. Step by step they pulled, their hooves sinking into mud, their tails flicking at flies. Farmers led them with steady hands. Merchants walked beside. Children sometimes rode upon the sacks of grain or bales of hay piled high. The cart was more than transport, it was livelihood. It carried wood from the forest, stone from the quarry, wool to the fullers, grain to the mill. At harvest it bore sheaves to the barn, at market it bore goods to be sold. Without the cart, the village would have bent beneath the weight of its own labor. Its creak was the music of survival. To meet riders and carts along the road was to witness the variety of medieval travel. A knight in armor upon a tall horse passed swiftly, the sun glinting upon polished steel. A farmer's cart rattled slowly, its oxen patient, the driver waving, as others stepped aside. A merchant's mule carried panniers bulging with goods, bells jingling faintly at its harness. A pilgrim, weary, accepted a ride upon the edge of a cart. Grateful for relief from the long walk, sometimes travelers clustered together. Riders slowed to match the pace of walkers. Carts paused to let riders pass. Walkers held to the verge, as wheels rolled by. The road was shared, and though rank and wealth showed in saddle or burden, the path itself made all companions, at least for a moment. In spring, the hooves of horses splashed through puddles, carts sank deep in mud, oxen strained against their loads. Blossoms fell upon the backs of animals, white petals scattered with every breeze. In summer, the air shimmered with heat. Horses sweated, their flanks lathered white. Donkeys flicked their ears against flies, tails swishing constantly. The wheels of carts raised dust that hung golden in the sun, coating hair and skin alike. Travelers paused often to water their beasts at streams, to let them graze upon roadside grass. In autumn, the roads were busiest. Carts piled high with harvest rumbled slowly. Horses pulled wagons heavy with apples, with cider, with grain. The air smelled of hay, of dung, of smoke, of plenty. Children perched upon wagons waved to those who passed, their laughter mingling with the creak of wheels. In winter, riding became hardship. Horses slipped upon ice, their breath steaming, their manes crusted with frost. Donkeys balked at frozen puddles, mules trudged stubbornly forward, carts rattled less often, for roads were dangerous and food scarce. Yet still, some journeys could not wait, and the slow creak of wheels could still be heard against the muffled stillness of snow. To travel with an animal was to depend upon it utterly. A rider cared for his horse as for himself, feeding it, watering it, brushing its coat, tending its hooves. A farmer treated his oxen with patience, for their strength was his livelihood. A merchant blessed his mule for every steady mile it walked. Man and beast moved together, bound by rope, by leather, by trust, by necessity. And when the day ended, animals rested alongside their masters. Horses were unsaddled, rubbed down, given hay and water. Oxen were unyoked, their shoulders rubbed, their flanks patted. Donkeys and mules cropped grass quietly, while their burdens were lifted away. The road belonged to both man and beast. Their partnership, the only way to cross the long miles of the medieval world. So pause here. Listen to the rhythm of hooves upon the earth, the quick drum of a horse, the slow tread of oxen, the steady shuffle of a mule. Hear the creak of wheels, the jingle of harness, the snort of warm breath in the cool air. Smell the leather, the hay, the sweat, the dust. To travel by horse or cart is to share the journey with another life, to feel the road not only beneath your feet, but beneath hooves and wheels. Travel was never swift, never easy, yet it was steady, enduring, shared, and in that slow companionship there was comfort. For the road was long, but no one traveled it entirely alone. Every journey needs its pause. However far the traveler walks, however steady the cart rolls or the horse carries, there comes a moment when the body aches, the light fades, and rest is sought. In medieval Europe, the road was lined here and there with places of welcome. Taverns in villages, roadside inns upon the great routes, and guest houses near monasteries. Hospitality was both necessity and virtue, for without it, the traveler might find only the cold hedge or the damp ground for shelter. At the heart of many villages stood the tavern. Its door was low, its roof thatched, its walls timber and plaster, but within warmth and fellowship were offered. Step inside, and the air is thick with the smell of smoke and ale, of roasting meat and damp wool. The fire blazes in the hearth, logs crackling, sparks rising into the dim rafters. Benches line rough tables, mugs and jugs rest ready, and the murmur of voices fills the room. Here, locals gather at the end of a day's labor. Farmers with soil still clinging to their boots, shepherds smelling faintly of lanolin, smiths with arms blackened by soot. Their laughter rises in bursts, their songs weave through the smoke. Travelers enter timidly, their cloaks heavy with dust, their purses clinking faintly, and soon find themselves part of the company. A cup of ale is offered, bread placed before them, a seat found near the fire. The ale is thick, often cloudy, sometimes sour, yet welcome to the dry throat. Bread is dark and coarse, its crust hard, its crumb filling. Perhaps a wedge of cheese is shared, sharp and salty, perhaps a stew of beans and cabbage is ladled into bowls. The food is plain, yet in the warmth of the tavern, in the hum of voices, it feels abundant. A pilgrim sits quietly in the corner, staff resting against the wall, his hat marked with a scallop shell. He listens as the villagers sing, his bowl steaming before him, his lips moving in silent prayer. He has walked far, and tomorrow he will walk further still. But tonight, the tavern is his heaven. When the hour grows late, some travelers may sleep here too, stretched upon benches, cloaks pulled over their heads, the fire burning low. Others find lodging with villagers, who open barns or lofts in exchange for a coin, or for news of the wider world. Beyond the villages, along the greater roads, stood the roadside inns. Larger than taverns, they were built to serve merchants, pilgrims, messengers, and nobles passing between towns. A wide gate opened into a courtyard, where horses were led to stables. Carts rolled in with a groan of wheels, and chickens pecked at scattered grain. The inn itself rose 2 stories, timber-framed, its signs swinging in the wind. Inside, the common room was crowded, benches filled with men and women of many kinds, pilgrims with shells upon their hats, merchants with purses heavy, soldiers with swords at their belts. The fire roared, its light glinting on cups and platters. Servants hurried, carrying trenchers of bread, bowls of broth, jugs of wine. The smell of roasting meat filled the air, rich and heavy, mingling with the sweat of bodies and the smoke of torches. Meals here were heartier than in the village tavern. A roasted capon turning on the spit, dripping fat into the flames. Bowls of peas and beans, loaves of wheat bread for those who could pay, barley for those who could not. Ale flowed freely, wine more sparingly. The noise was loud, laughter booming, arguments sharp, the clatter of spoons and knives filling the hall. A merchant enters, his cloak lined with dust from the day's ride, his mule led by the reins into the stable. He carries a pouch of coins, and with it buys a seat near the fire. Soon his trencher is heaped with food, roast meat, beans, bread, and his mug brims with wine. He shares tales of distant towns, of markets filled with cloth and spices, of ships in harbor. Those at the table listen eagerly, for he brings the world beyond the village into this crowded hall. Sleeping was rough but sufficient. Beds of straw in shared rooms, cloaks hung upon pegs, boots aligned against the wall. Snoring rose in chorus. Fleas and lice were common, privacy rare. Yet the roof was solid, the fire kept the chill at bay, and for the weary traveler that was enough. In the courtyard, horses stamped, oxen lowed, donkeys brayed. The smell of manure mingled with that of hay, of leather, of smoke. The inn was a place of life, noisy, crowded, bustling, with those who moved along the roads. For some, especially the pilgrim, the most welcome lodging was at a monastery. Nearly every great abbey kept a guest house, a place where strangers were received, not for coin but for charity. To open the door to a pilgrim was to serve Christ himself, and monks treated the weary traveler with kindness. The guest house was simpler than an inn, but calmer. Its rooms were plain, with pallets of straw, woolen blankets, a small fire in the hearth. Silence often reigned, broken only by the bell calling monks to prayer. Food was given freely, bread baked in the abbey ovens, cheese from the dairy, ale brewed in the cloisters, vegetables from the monastic garden. Sometimes fish was offered, fresh from the pond, seasoned with herbs. The meal was eaten quietly, heads bowed, thanks murmured. To stay in such a place was to feel peace, even if only for a night. The chant of monks drifted through the air. Candles glowed upon stone walls, and the traveler slept deeply, untroubled by quarrels or drunken song. In the morning, the monks blessed the road ahead, and the pilgrim stepped out renewed. A wandering minstrel rests here too, his lute laid aside, his stories unspoken for one night. Tomorrow he will play again in marketplaces and halls, but tonight silence soothes him. He eats the monks' bread, drinks their ale, and sleeps under their roof. Grateful for the mercy of hospitality, each place of rest had its own sounds and scents, its own rhythm. The tavern, laughter, gossip, the clink of mugs, the smell of ale and smoke. The roadside inn, shouting, arguments, snorting horses, the scent of roasting meat and dung. The monastery, silence, the soft toll of bells, the smell of beeswax candles and fresh bread. For the traveler each was welcome in its own way. Each gave warmth, food, companionship, and the gift of sleep. Without them, the road would be harsher, the nights colder, the journey lonelier. In spring, the tavern is crowded with farmers celebrating planting, the inn busy with pilgrims bound for Easter shrines, the monastery offering fresh milk and early greens from its gardens. In summer, the doors are flung wide, benches set outside, travelers drinking in the warm air, merchants gathering before fairs, pilgrims resting in the shade of cloisters. In autumn, inns are loud with merchants returning from market, carts loaded with grain and wine, taverns ring with songs of harvest, monasteries gather apples and honey to share with guests. In winter, all grow more precious. Taverns are crowded with bodies pressed close, inns filled to the rafters with those fleeing snow. Monasteries open their doors wider, offering bread and fire to those who would otherwise freeze. Pause here and picture the fire glowing in the tavern. Hearth, hear the laughter and song. Picture the courtyard of the inn, carts creaking in, horses stamping, servants bustling. Picture the quiet of the monastery, candlelight flickering, monks chanting softly in the night. Each is a haven, each a gift to the weary. Travel was hard, but rest was real. Hospitality was the breath between footsteps, the peace between miles. And though the road stretched long, its burdens were lightened by these pauses, by bread shared, by fire's warmth, by a bed of straw. Every road holds its challenges. Some are gentle, a stone beneath the foot, a hill to climb, a bend in the path. But others are greater, rivers that must be crossed, forests that must be entered. In medieval Europe, rivers and forests shaped every journey. They offered life and danger alike, beauty and fear together. To cross them was to test patience and courage, yet also to marvel at the world's vastness and mystery. I imagine walking a long, dusty lane, fields stretching on either side, and then hearing the murmur of water ahead. The sound grows stronger, gurgling, rushing, rippling. Soon the hedges open, and there lies the river. Wide or narrow, calm or swift, shallow or deep. It bars the way, demanding a crossing. Some rivers were forded. Travelers waded where the water ran shallow, boots sloshing, hems soaked, carts creaking as oxen strained. The stones were slippery, the current tugged at the legs, but with care and patience the crossing was made. Children squealed with cold as the water reached their knees. Men steadied their loads. Women clutched their baskets high. On warm days, laughter rose. On cold days, the water's bite brought silence and grim determination. Some rivers bore bridges, stone or timber, grand or humble. A wooden bridge creaked beneath hooves and wheels, its planks damp and mossy. A stone bridge arched gracefully, strong and enduring, its stones worn smooth by countless feet. Trolls were whispered of in tales, but in truth it was tolls the traveler feared, for many bridges required payment. A coin dropped into the hand of the keeper, a nod, and the way was opened. Where rivers were wide, ferries carried travelers. A flat-bottomed boat, pulled by rope or pole, swayed as animals stamped, and travelers held their breath. The water lapped close, the ferry creaked, the current tugged. Slowly, steadily, the far bank grew nearer, until at last wheels thudded upon earth again. Boots stepped onto solid ground, and relief washed over all. Rivers spoke with many voices. The rush of rapids over rocks, the soft lap of water against reeds, the splash of fish rising, the call of ducks and geese. At night, the river's voice deepened, a steady murmur beneath the stars. The smell of the river was sharp and fresh. Wet stone, damp reeds, the faint sweetness of algae, the musk of fish. On hot days it smelled of warmth and life, on cold days of iron and ice. Each crossing was remembered by its scent, as much as by its sight. Beyond rivers lay forests, vast, dark, and whispering. To enter a forest was to step into another world. The path narrowed beneath towering trees. Branches tangled overhead, shutting out the sun. The air grew cooler, damp with moss and leaf mold. Every sound was amplified, the crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the sudden call of a bird. Forests were both feared and revered. They were places of hunting and foraging, where wood was cut and berries gathered. Yet they were also places of danger. Wolves prowled, boars charged, outlaws lurked. Tales were told of spirits and ghosts, of strange lights and voices that lured the unwary. Children listened wide-eyed to such stories, and even grown men quickened their steps when shadows lengthened. Yet beauty filled the forest too. Sunlight pierced in shafts, striking mossy trunks. Wildflowers bloomed in clearings, streams gurgled beneath ferns, deer stepped softly across the path, pausing to lift their heads and gaze with dark eyes. Mushrooms clustered at roots, berries glowed red among leaves, birds sang unseen from high branches. For the traveler, the forest was mystery and gift alike. Picture a pilgrim entering the forest, staff in hand, cloak drawn close. Each step crunches upon fallen leaves. Each breath tastes of damp earth. His prayer beads slip through his fingers as he walks, steadying his heart against the silence. Picture a merchant leading a mule laden with cloth. The bells on its harness jingle faintly. The animal snorts nervously, its ears flicking at every rustle. The merchant hums to himself to keep fear at bay, to remind himself of the path ahead. Picture a band of children gathering nuts, their laughter high, their baskets filling. They scatter at the sight of a fox, then return to their work, singing as they move among the trees. In spring, the forest is alive with new growth. Buds unfurl, wild garlic scents the air, birds fill the branches with song. Streams rush fast with melted snow, their banks carpeted in primroses. The forest feels like promise, like beginning. In summer, the canopy is dense, green shadows stretching far. The air is warm, heavy with the smell of pine, of sap, of blossoms. Bees hum, flies buzz, midges dance in shafts of light. The forest feels endless, enclosing, alive with hidden life. In autumn, the leaves turn gold and crimson, falling thick upon the path. The air smells of mushrooms, of ripe fruit, of damp wood. Squirrels chatter, gathering acorns. Birds call overhead. The forest feels like abundance, like farewell. In winter, the trees stand bare, their branches stark against the gray sky. Snow muffles sound, icicles hang from roots, breath clouds the air. The forest feels still, hushed, like a place asleep. Sometimes the traveler rests within the forest. A clearing is found, a fallen log becomes a seat. Bread and cheese are unwrapped. Water drunk from a flask. The sounds of the forest surround. The rustle of leaves, the murmur of a stream, the tapping of a woodpecker high above. Fear softens in these moments, replaced by wonder. The forest, once daunting, becomes companion. At night, a fire is lit if wood is found. Flames flicker, casting shadows that dance upon the trees. The crackle of burning, the warmth upon the face, the smell of smoke, all comfort the weary traveler. Beyond the circle of light, the forest waits, vast and dark. But within, there is safety and rest. Often the two are joined. A river runs through the forest, its surface glimmering with light, its banks edged with moss. To follow it is to find direction. To drink from it is to find life. Deer gather at its edge, birds dart above, fish flash beneath. To cross it within the forest is challenge greater still. Fallen logs slippery with moss, stones half hidden, currents swift. Yet each crossing brings relief. Each step forward brings the journey closer to its end. So pause here. Listen to the sound of water rushing, of trees whispering, of footsteps upon leaves. Smell the damp earth, the fresh river air, the smoke of a small fire. Feel the weight of the journey, the fear of shadow, the joy of crossing, the peace of resting. Rivers and forests were barriers, but also bridges, teaching patience, courage, reverence. Every traveler who crossed them carried the memory, the chill of water, the hush of trees, the relief of the far bank, the light of the clearing. And as we walk with them now, step by step, we too may find not only the challenge, but the blessing in the journey. At dawn, the pilgrim rises. The cock crows in a distant village. Mist lies low in the fields, and the first light softens the horizon. He crosses himself, folds his blanket, and shoulders his pack. His feet ache, but he walks. By mid-morning, the road is busy. A group of pilgrims sing a hymn, their voices weaving with the sound of carts creaking past. A farmer pauses to watch, handing them apples from his orchard. The pilgrim thanks him, tucks the fruit into his pouch, and moves on. At noon, the sun beats hot. Cloaks are loosened, hats pulled low. Pilgrims gather beneath a tree, share bread and cheese, drink from flasks. A prayer is murmured before they rise again. By afternoon, the miles weigh heavy. Blisters burn, shoulders ache, yet prayers steady the heart. At a wayside cross, the pilgrim kneels, touching the wood, whispering thanks for strength. Evening falls. Smoke rises from a village ahead. The pilgrims enter, greeted by dogs barking, children peering, a woman at the well. Bread is offered, a place in the barn, straw for sleep. The pilgrim rests, the day's miles behind him. Tomorrow it begins again, on the Camino de Santiago, the way of St. James. The path stretches through mountains and plains. Pilgrims cross rivers by stone bridges, climb rocky passes, descend into valleys rich with vineyards. They gather in great crowds at Compostela, candles raised high, voices ringing in the cathedral. The scallop shell gleams upon every cloak, proof of the vow fulfilled. On the road to Canterbury, pilgrims walk through fields of England, stopping at shrines along the way. Stories are told, some merry, some solemn. At last the great cathedral rises, its windows glowing with colored light. The shrine of Thomas Becket shines with jewels, its golden case lifted high. Pilgrims kneel, touch the relic, weep with joy. On the road to Rome, pilgrims cross the Alps, their breaths ragged with the climb, their cloaks heavy with snow. Yet at last the eternal city lies before them, its basilicas vast, its bells tolling. The tombs of Peter and Paul await, candles burning bright, incense rising in clouds. Even to Jerusalem some ventured, by sea and land through danger and distance. They returned with tokens of the Holy Sepulchre, of the River Jordan, of the Mount of Olives. Their stories spread through villages, awe in every word. A poor farmer, his fields left to neighbors, walks barefoot to Santiago. He has vowed the journey if his son recovers from sickness. Each blister, each hunger pang, he offers as prayer. At last, before the shrine he kneels, his face wet with tears, whispering thanks. A wealthy lady rides part of the way, attendants carrying her gear. Yet she too must walk, must pray, must endure heat and cold. She strips away finery, dons the cloak and staff of a pilgrim, and finds herself humbled, her heart opened in ways she never knew. A child, frail and fevered, is carried by his father to Canterbury. The family begs at doors, gathers coins, sleeps beneath hedges. At the shrine, the child is laid before the relics. Candles burn, priests pray, and though no miracle comes that day, the family feels peace. Hope itself has been sanctified. Around every great shrine life bloomed, markets filled the streets, candles, badges, relic tokens, food, and for pilgrims. Bread was sold warm, fish grilled upon spits, pies filled with apples and spices. Minstrels played, children darted, bells rang overhead. On feast days, processions wound through towns, pilgrims carrying banners, clergy lifting relics high, incense drifting in clouds. Voices rose in chants, the crowd answering in waves. The shrine was both holy and festive, both solemn and joyful, both heaven and earth mingled. At last the pilgrim turned back, cloak faded, boots worn thin, staff scarred by many miles. Yet upon the hat gleamed the shell, upon the cloak hung the badge, proof of the journey. Villages greeted the pilgrim with awe, with pride. Families wept, neighbors pressed close. The priest gave thanks at the altar. The pilgrim spoke of relics, of visions, of markets, of companions met upon the road. Children listened wide-eyed, elders nodded with reverence. The tokens were placed upon the altar, holy keepsakes for all to see. But the true treasure lay within. The pilgrim returned changed, humbled by hardship, lifted by faith, strengthened by prayer. His journey became the village's blessing, his stories their encouragement, his shell and badge their reminder of God's nearness. So pause here, walk again in the pilgrim's steps. Hear the shuffle of countless feet, the tap of staffs upon stone, the chant of prayers rising. Smell the incense at the shrine, the bread baking in markets, the damp earth of the road. See the faces of pilgrims, weary yet radiant, burdened yet lifted. Pilgrimage was not only travel. It was prayer, sacrifice, communion. It was hardship turned to offering, distance turned to devotion. To walk as a pilgrim was to walk the road of life itself. Always forward, always upward, always homeward. And even now, as we rest, the echo of their footsteps continues. The road of pilgrimage has no end, for it leads not only to shrines of stone, but to the shrine within the heart. After long days of lanes and hedgerows, of forests and rivers, the sight of a town filled the heart with both relief and anticipation. First came the spire of the church, rising above the fields, then the cluster of roofs, with smoke curling upward from chimneys, then the walls, stone or timber, circling the heart of the town. Bells rang faintly, dogs barked, carts rattled over cobblestones. The road widened. The fields gave way to houses, and the traveler stepped into a world alive with voices and color. The gate might be guarded, a toll demanded, questions asked, or it might stand open, people passing freely, merchants, peasants, pilgrims, minstrels, nobles, all pressing inward. The sound grew louder with each step, until the quiet rhythm of the road was replaced entirely by the chorus of town life. At the heart of the town lay the market square, wide and open, paved with cobblestones or packed earth, overflowing with stalls and carts, with tents and awnings, with baskets and barrels. Every sense was stirred at once. The eye was dazzled by colors, bolts of cloth dyed red and blue and green, heaps of apples, glowing gold and russet, fish shimmering silver upon wooden boards, candles pale and smooth in neat rows. Flags fluttered, ribbons streamed, painted signs swung in the breeze. The ear was filled with sound, vendors calling, buyers bargaining, children laughing, pigs squealing, chickens clucking, dogs barking, bells ringing, hammers clanging from forges nearby. The nose was overwhelmed by scents, the sweetness of honey, the sharpness of onions, the richness of roasting meat, the salt tang of fish, the sourness of hides curing, the smokiness of fires. The touch was constant too. The press of the crowd, the brush of cloaks, the roughness of coins exchanged, the smoothness of apples held, the scratch of wool, the softness of linen, and always the taste beckoned, a sip of ale, a bite of bread, a sample of cheese, a morsel of pie. The market invited every sense to feast. The stalls themselves overflowed. Farmers brought sacks of grain, baskets of beans, wheels of cheese, hams cured and hung. Bakers sold loaves still warm, pies filled with meat or fruit, gingerbread spiced and sweet. Brewers offered jugs of ale. Vintners poured wine for those who could pay. Merchants displayed bolts of cloth, wool from Flanders, linen from England, silk from Italy. Dyers sold ribbons bright as jewels. Tanners laid out leather belts and boots. Glovers sold soft hides. Smiths hammered tools and nails. Peddlers tempted with trinkets, pins and needles, combs of bone, beads of glass, mirrors of polished metal. Children begged for whistles or carved wooden toys. And always animals filled the square. Sheep bleated, pigs squealed, chickens flapped, horses neighed. Their smells mingled with all others. Their sounds rose above the din. For the traveler, the market was not only for buying, it was for meeting. A pilgrim might find companions. A merchant might strike a bargain. A minstrel might find his audience. News spread swiftly here of wars, of kings, of harvests, of distant towns. Letters might be carried, contracts signed, friendships renewed. Imagine a pilgrim stepping into the square, staff in hand, eyes wide with wonder. He marvels at the colors, listens to the voices, smells the bread. He pauses to buy a candle to carry to the shrine ahead. Imagine a farmer with his cart of apples. He bargains with a housewife, sells to a baker, gives one freely to a hungry child. His pockets grow heavy with coins. His cart grows lighter. His heart lifts. Imagine a minstrel climbing onto a stool, lute in hand, singing of battles and saints, of love and laughter. A crowd gathers, coins are tossed, children clap, voices join in chorus. Markets changed with the seasons. In spring, they were filled with seedlings, herbs, lambs, and early greens. The air smelled of wet earth, of flowers, of new beginnings. In summer, markets burst with abundance, berries, beans, cucumbers, cherries. The sun shone upon bright cloth, upon polished brass, upon laughing crowds. In autumn, the market grew heavy with harvest. Apples, nuts, grain, cider, honey, stalls sagged beneath plenty, wagons rolled in creaking under their loads. Great fairs were held, with music, dancing, contests of strength and skill. In winter, markets were smaller, but more precious. Salt fish, smoked meat, dried fruit, woolen cloaks, candles for Christmas. Snow might fall, breath might cloud, yet still the square filled, voices rising into the cold air. Some fairs lasted for days, even weeks. Merchants came from distant lands, bringing spices from the east, furs from the north, wine from the south. The square overflowed, stalls spilled into streets, inns filled to bursting. Music and laughter rang far into the night. Jugglers, dancers, acrobats performed, their talents dazzling. Nobles arrived with their retinues, peasants with carts, pilgrims with staffs. A fair was both market and festival, trade and celebration together. Order was maintained by guilds and officials. Guilds ruled the trades, bakers, butchers, weavers, smiths. They set prices, inspected goods, enforced standards. Their halls stood near the square, proud with banners, their members respected. Tolls were collected at the gates, weights and measures checked by officers. Cheats were punished, fines were paid. The market was busy, noisy, sometimes chaotic, but never lawless. For the weary traveler, the town offered more than goods. It offered shelter. Inns lined the streets, taverns bustled, monasteries opened guest houses. A bathhouse might be found, its steam rising, its waters easing sore limbs. A barber trimmed hair and beard, a healer offered herbs and salves. The body was renewed, the spirit lifted. Now pause and step back into the square in your mind. Hear the clamor, the laughter, the bargaining. Smell the bread, the cheese, the fish, the flowers. Feel the crowd pressing close, the coins warm in your palm, the staff steady in your hand. See the banners, the ribbons, the faces, so many faces, each with its own story, each part of this vast gathering. The market was more than trade. It was life itself, concentrated and magnified. It was the heartbeat of the town, the meeting of roads, the mingling of people. For the traveler, it was a place of wonder, a reminder that the world was wide and full of gifts. Every road, however gentle, keeps its shadows. Even the kindest path, bright with hedgerow flowers and warm with summer dust, holds places where the traveler's heart grows cautious. In the medieval world, the dangers of the road were not constant terrors, but steady possibilities, like clouds that drift across a fair sky, reminding the walker to mind his steps and keep his wits. And yet, as we wander here together, we will speak of these dangers softly, as one might whisper by a low fire, not to summon fear, but to honor the patience and care with which travelers moved through them and came safely home. There were the dangers of the weather, first of all, for the sky rules every journey. A bright morning can fold itself into rain before noon. A steady lane can turn to grease beneath the traveler's boots. The clay slick as soap. The ruts brimming with brown water. In spring, when the fields are young and the ditches full, a sudden shower sweeps in. The wind lifts the cloak, and every hem is soaked. Walkers pull hoods forward. Riders bend low on their horses' necks, and carts slow to a careful crawl. The rain hammers the surfaces of puddles until they shimmer like bright coins, and the world smells of earth and grass and wet wood. Then, as quickly, the shower passes. Travelers shake out their cloaks, wring the water from their sleeves, and move on, steam rising from wool as the sun returns. Summer brings its own trial. Dust lifts at every step and hangs in the air. It powders faces and settles on lashes and lips. The heat presses like a hand upon the shoulders, and the mouth longs for shade and a drink. A wayside brook becomes a blessing. Boots off, feet in, faces washed, water cupped in both hands and lifted gratefully. Animals are watered, packs are shifted. The company sits under an ash tree where the thin, clean smell of sap cools the breath. Only a little further, someone murmurs, and when they rise, their shadows are shorter and their steps renewed. Autumn is kinder, but even its gold hides edges. The lane is soft with fallen leaves, and beneath them lie stones that roll underfoot. A horse's hoof can slip on a hidden patch of mud, and a wheel can slide sideways in a shallow ditch. So the driver rests a hand on the rim and guides the cart with a steady mind. Winds freshen and tug at cloaks. Apples fall in the orchards and thud softly in grass. Travelers feel the year folding around them like a cloak, a reminder to keep close to villages, to find the inn before dark, to carry an extra loaf for the long miles between markets. Winter, of course, is the elder of road troubles. Frost tightens the ground until it rings beneath boots. Puddles skin over with lace and crack at the first touch. Snow dulls every sound and hides the road's edges. So that a traveler walks the center by memory more than sight, taking the measure of each field and hedgerow, counting the steps between one stile and the next. There is a particular hush to winter travel, the breath, a white thread in the air, the far bell of a church made clearer by the cold. Then, too, comes the wisdom of the winter traveler. Start early and early. Keep together. Keep warm. Carry embers in a covered pot if you can, to quicken a new fire. At day's end, rivers fold themselves into the story of danger as well, though they also carry so much life. A ford is a friendly line of stones when the water runs low, but when rain swells the stream, the path disappears. The current shoulders the legs, a mule balks and stamps. The cold stings like nettles. Travelers loosen belts so wet leather will not bite, lift bundles high, and pass across together, one steadying another. Sometimes the ferry is the safer way, a broad, low boat, where beasts are coaxed aboard and men stand with knees braced. The ferryman, brown as oak, sets the pole and slides the boat from bank to bank, and all eyes follow his hands. Slow work, careful work, and then wheels bump onto soil again, and someone laughs softly from relief. Forests bring the oldest stories. They are not wicked places, only deep and alive, but a new traveler feels small beneath the vault of branches. The path narrows to a ribbon. Moss mutes the footfall. Resin scents the air. A woodpecker strikes a quick drumbeat on a hollow tree. A deer steps startled across the path and vanishes. Once, the road divides. Two pale tracks through leaf mold, both plausible, both uncertain. This is its own kind of danger, the quiet fear of losing the way. In such a moment, travelers do what they have always done. They read the ground. They listen for water. They mark the sun's slope through leaves. If they meet a woodcutter's boy with an armful of sticks, they ask, and he points with his chin and says, "That way, sir." And the world opens again. There were men to be feared, it is true, desperate men who empty pockets as winter empties barns. To walk safely was to walk in company. When pilgrims kept pace with merchants, a shepherd fell into step with a pair of carters, and voices moved together on the air. Wary eyes scanned the tree line where the lane grew tight against a bank of scrub. Wary feet quickened between stretches of open heath and swamp. Yet even here, the old rules of care softened the road. Travel by day. 2 hours after dawn to 2 hours before dusk. Keep to the known track. Trust the cross on the hill, the bell of the nearest spire, the standing stone that marks the boundary between one parish and the next, and in the unlikely hour when a shadow lengthened wrong, a cart was drawn close to a hedge. Hands took up staffs, and a silence spread that could be felt. But most days, nothing came of it but a deeper gratitude for bread and laughter shared. That night, illness is a quieter danger, and loneliness its cousin. A blister spreads and makes the foot hot. A cough takes hold after a day in cold rain. A fever rises under a traveler's cloak like a second sun. The remedy is patience, and the oldest medicine, warmth, broth, and sleep. Monasteries stood on many routes with guest rooms where a stranger found not only straw, but a basin and gentle hands. Villagers kept the custom of the open door. A bench by the hearth might be given for the night to a man whose cheeks were too bright with fever. And always there were herbs and little helps. A sprig of rosemary in the cup for comfort, a pinch of ground, fennel for the belly, a pungent salve for the raw heel, if a soul grew sad from the long quiet, homesick beneath dot, a winter sky. The road had ways to mend that too. A piper at the inn, a child offering a hot chestnut from the coals, a wise woman who pressed a charm of Saint James into the palm and said, "You are not alone. There is also the danger of the night itself, which is simply the world in its other face. Light retires, the road fades to a soft idea more than a visible track. The air cools and the scents rise. Wet grass, wood smoke in ribbons, the faint wild sweetness of crushed leaves. Traveling late was not preferred, but sometimes the crossing ran long, or the wheel needed repair. Then a fire must be made with thrift and set well. A circle marked quietly, the animals fed and watered, the men keeping turns. One wakes, one sleeps, one listens to the talk of the small flames. Stars come forward and settle the mind. The moon moves. The world is not the enemy. It is large and one is small, and that is both a warning and a comfort. To speak softly of danger is also to speak of all the small defenses that travelers carried in their habits. They wrapped bread in cloth and kept it dry from a sudden shower. They tied a cord around a bundle twice, so it did not slip when fording. They kept a little tinder and a horn, safe from damp. They train the ear to know the difference between wind in ash leaves and the patter of something heavier. They learn the lay of familiar roads, the taste of a certain well's water, the angle of a certain stile, the way a certain hill holds the last light. They taught these to children until the knowledge was as natural as breath, and when danger rose, it was not always met with strength. Often it was met with courtesy. At a narrow bridge, a rider holds, lifts a hand, and lets the cart go first. At a steep bank, a man steps aside to let a woman pass, then offers his hand for the last 2 paces, not to pull, but to steady. At a ferry crowded with beasts and burdens, someone yields the middle of the boat and stands near the edge, knees bent, so that another may keep both hands upon a timid fall. Small mercies draw a road together, like stitches. Fear loosens in minds when kindness is near. Travelers also carried the invisible defenses of their day. A whispered blessing at the crossroad, the touch of a charm hung at the neck, the sign of the cross traced lightly on the brow before stepping into the river. A man might speak a saint's name softly. When thunder piled over hills, a woman might tuck a spray of yarrow into her pouch against mischance. Whether these carry power or only courage, they turn fear into prayer, and prayer steadies the feet. From time to time, the road asked for cleverness. A cartwheel cracked, and a willow wand and wet leather became a splint to bring it home. A shoe pulled off in the mud, and the walker stepped barefoot a little while, choosing each patch of earth with thought, then dried the foot at a fire and bound it with cloth. A bridge was out, and the travelers traced the river upstream until they found a fallen tree that served well enough. Crossing one by one, with laughter held between teeth at the little wobble in the middle. The world tests and teaches by the same hand. There were longer troubles, too. Roads made unsafe by quarrels between lords. Tolls set too high at certain gates. A sickness moving from town to town, which made people shut their doors. In such years the wise chose other routes. A trader shifted his path to a line of smaller markets. A pilgrim waited 3 weeks at an abbey until the road was kinder. Time itself was a tool. The delay was sometimes to win the day. Listen now to a quiet tale made of smaller things. A pair of brothers walk a long stretch between 2 towns with a cart of wool. Clouds pile, grey upon grey, and rain comes harder than sense expects. The lane dissolves into folds and rivulets. The cart sinks to the axle by a cattle trough where the lane dips. They could curse, but instead they unharness the patient beasts and lead them to the side where the ground is firmer and green. One brother gathers armfuls of brush to lay beneath the wheel like a raft. The other breaks a spade from its handle and wedges the plank under the rim. They work in silence, then in laughter. A woman from the farmhouse brings a wooden trencher, heaped with boiled barley and leeks, and a jug of ale, and stands under her hood watching the brothers strain. At last the wheel lifts and turns, and the cart slips forward onto good ground. The woman smiles, the brothers bow, the beasts shake their heads free of rain. They push on toward evening, wet to the bone but light in the heart. This too is the road: difficulty, patience, a stranger's kindness, and the sound of wheels. moving again. Or consider a night in a dark belt of woodland, where tales are old and owls speak. 4 travelers, 2 men, a girl, and an old woman, step into the shadow longer than they hoped, for the ford was swollen, and they lost an hour seeking stones. The path is narrow, and the trees crowd in. The girl's fingers find the old woman's sleeve. "We will rest," says one of the men, and they do, choosing a shallow ball of ground between roots where 3 trunks stand like a shelter. They gather wood by touch and by memory, brittle twigs from the undersides of branches, leaves that still crackle, not the black ones that dampen a fire. They build a small, obedient flame and sit close. The girl holds bread and eats slowly. The old woman rubs her hands and tells a simple story about a date, simple saint who helped a lost cow find her way by moonlight. It seems childish and perfect. Later, when the fire has fallen to a red breath, the men take turns keeping watch. An animal moves softly somewhere beyond and passes on. The night dawns into a pale netted morning. When they stand, the girl says, "I thought I would be afraid." And the old woman answers, "So did I, once," and smiles. Some dangers are merely misunderstandings. At a toll gate, a keeper scowls, thinking the travelers have slipped past yesterday without paying. Voices climb, hands open to show purses, to show badges, to show the pilgrim's shell. Another gatekeeper, older, slower, recognizes a face and nods. They paid in the morning. The scowl melts. An extra copper is laid on the ledge anyway, a small gift for the trouble. The gate swings wide, and a sour taste is washed from the mouth by a sip of ale. And the next mile walked, to keep safe, was also to know when to stop. There is a wisdom the road teaches everyone who truly listens to it. That haste is a kind of blindness, and the safest step is the step you can see. When a wind drives rain sideways and strips leaves from branches as if they were paper, people call it a day. When mist floats low in a marsh and makes the world a room the size of a cottage, people wait. There is shame in neither. The journey takes what time it takes, and those who accept this return with all they carried, and more, in quiet knowledge. And so gently, we see that the dangers of the medieval road were not the end of the story. They were simply the darker threads in the same cloth. Weather, water, woodlands, mischance, mischief, illness, and night. These were real, but so were readiness, goodwill, shared bread, the steadying staff, the fairy rope, the inn fire, the monk's bowl, the farmer's apple. For every hour of anxiety, there were 2 hours of method and small courage. For every shadow, a handful of lamplight. Walk with me a few last steps along this careful path. The sky is paling to evening. A breeze folds the dust down and lays it like velvet. Somewhere ahead, a bell speaks, slow, kind, unafraid. The road dips and rises. Between hedges, the last light clings like honey. The traveler looks back once, and you can tell by the tilt of the head that the day held its small worries. But you can also tell that the day has ended safely, as most days do. The lane runs into a village. Smoke rises. Doors open. There is soup enough. And a place on a bench. and a dry cloak to borrow, while one's own steams before the hearth. Dangers on the road are not the story's teeth, they are its reminders, to be gentle with time, to be generous with one another, to keep one's feet and one's faith. They chasten, but they also teach. And the lesson is this, that even in a wide world full of weather and chance, people carry one another toward the light, mile after slow mile, until the way grows familiar and the night grows kind. Every road, no matter how long, has its end. Every journey, whether measured in miles or months, comes at last to the moment of arrival. The medieval traveler, weary in body but steady in spirit, longed for this moment, when the burdens of the road fell away and the comfort of rest drew near. See, the final steps often carried a sweetness unlike any other. After forests dark and rivers wide, after the dust of summer and the frost of winter, the sight of home or haven brought tears to the eyes. A church tower rising on the horizon, a roof familiar in outline, the smell of wood smoke on the evening air, all told the traveler that the long road was behind him, and the circle was closing. Sometimes the journey ended at home, where family waited. A wife, standing at the door, shading her eyes against the sun, searching for the figure she knew, by gait even before by face. Children running barefoot to meet the returning traveler, their laughter ringing, their arms flung around weary legs. Neighbors gathering, calling greetings, pressing forward to hear stories of the road. The barn might still smell of hay, the hearth might still glow, yet the returning ones saw them anew, as if for the first time. Sometimes the journey ended at a destination more distant. A pilgrim reached the shrine he had long sought. A merchant entered the market town where his goods would be sold. A messenger stood before the castle gate with his letter delivered. Each ending carried its own weight, its own reward. A vow fulfilled, a profit gained, a duty discharged. Yet all endings shared the same sense of release, of breath let out, of rest at last. The final meal of a journey always tasted different. Bread torn at the home table, cheese sliced and shared, a pot of pottage bubbling with herbs. These were foods the traveler had eaten 100 times. Yet after the road they seemed richer. Even the simplest crust seemed feast enough when eaten with those one loved, in the place one belonged. For others, the feast was public, a banquet in a hall, a fair in a square, a monk's bowl of soup in a quiet refectory. Whatever form it took, the meal marked the closing of the road, the nourishment that said, "Here you may rest." Sleep, too, changed at the journey's end. After straw pallets in barns, after cold ground beneath hedges, after crowded inns with fleas and snores, the bed at home was a blessing beyond words. Wool blankets smelled of lavender stored with care, the hearth fire glowed, the roof overhead felt secure. The body sank deep, limbs heavy, heart easy. Dreams carried the traveler further still. But now the dreams were gentle, no longer shadowed by fear of robbers, storms, or hunger. Sleep became a gift as sacred as the road itself. The memories of the road lingered, however. Every traveler carried them back. The sound of the river rushing, the hush of the forest, the laughter in the tavern, the chants at the shrine, faces of strangers who became companions, of monks who gave bread, of farmers who offered apples, sights of mountains rising, of sunsets blazing, of markets bursting with life. These lingered, shaping stories told by the hearth for years to come. Children leaned forward, listening, wide-eyed. Neighbors nodded, smiling. Elders closed their eyes, remembering their own roads. The journeys lived on, even after feet had stilled. And in truth, no journey truly ended, for each ending carried seeds of new beginnings. The merchant planned his next venture. The pilgrim dreamed of another shrine. The messenger awaited another letter. Even the one who stayed home now saw the world differently, as if the dust of distant roads clung still to his cloak, whispering of horizons yet to come. The road did not vanish. It folded itself into the soul, ready to be walked again when the time was right. So let us pause, here at the end of the long journey. The fire glows in the hearth, the bowl is full, the bed is near. Outside, the road stretches on into shadow, but we need not follow it tonight. Tonight we rest. We breathe deeply. We let weariness fall away. We let peace settle upon us like a cloak. Close your eyes now, and let the journey's end be yours as well. Hear the faint sound of the road behind you, fading into silence. Feel the comfort of home about you. Warm and steady, know that the road will wait, turning ever onward. But for now, you may rest in its memory, in its blessing, in its peace. The journey is done, the traveler is home, and so are we